Section 28 of the Public Orations of Demosthenes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Roger Serling. The Public Orations of Demosthenes. Translated by Arthur Wallace Picard. On the Crown. Part 4. I find that in dealing with the measures taken by Aeschines for the injury of his country, I have reached the time when I must speak of my own statesmanship in opposition to these measures, and it is fair that you should listen to this for many reasons, but above all because it will be a shameful thing if, when I have faced the actual realities of hard work for you, you will not even suffer the story of them to be told. For when I saw the Thebans, and I may almost say yourselves as well, being led by the corrupt partisans of Philip in either state to overlook, without taking a single precaution against it, the thing which was really dangerous to both peoples and needed their utmost watchfulness, the unhindered growth of Philip's power, while, on the contrary, you were quite ready to entertain ill feeling and to quarrel with one another, I kept unceasing watch to prevent this. Nor did I rely only on my own judgment in thinking that this was what your interest required. I knew that Aristophane, and afterwards Eubulus, always wished to bring about this friendly union, and that, often as they opposed one another in other matters, they always agreed in this. Cunning fox! While they lived, you hung about them and flattered them, yet now that they are dead, you do not see that you are attacking them. For your censure of my policy in regard to Thebes is far more a denunciation of them than of me, since they are before me in approving of that alliance. But I return to my previous point, that it was when Aeschines had brought about the war at Amphissa, and the others, his accomplices, had effectually helped him to create the ill feeling against the Thebans, that Philip marched against us. For it was to render this possible that their attempt to throw the two cities into collision was made, and had we not roused ourselves a little before it was too late, we should never have been able to regain the lost ground. To such a length had these men carried matters. What the relations between the two peoples already were, you will know when you have heard these decrees and replies. Demosthenes to the clerk. Take these and read them. The decrees are read. Demosthenes to the clerk. Now read the replies. The replies are read. Having established such relations between the cities through the agency of these men, and being elated by these decrees and replies, Philip came with his army and seized Elatea, thinking that under no circumstances whatever should we and the Thebans join in unison after this. And though the commotion which followed in the city is known to you all, let me relate to you briefly just the bare facts. It was evening, and one had come to the Prytanes with the news that Elatea had been taken. Upon this they rose up from supper without delay. Some of them drove the occupants out of the booths in the marketplace and set fire to the wicker-work. Others sent for the generals and summoned the trumpeter, and the city was full of commotion. On the morrow, at break of day, the Prytanes summoned the council to the council chamber, while you made your way to the assembly. And before the council had transacted its business and passed its draft resolution, the whole people was seated on the hillside. And now, when the council had arrived, the Prytanes had reported the intelligence which they had received, and had brought forward the messenger, and he had made his statement. The herald proceeded to ask, "Who wishes to speak?" But no one came forward, and though the herald repeated the question many times, still no one rose, though all the generals were present, and all the orators, and the voice of their country was calling for someone to speak for her deliverance. For the voice of the herald, uttered in accordance with the laws, is rightly to be regarded as the common voice of our country. And yet, if it was for those to come forward who wished for the deliverance of the city, all of you and all the other Athenians would have risen and proceeded to the platform, for I am certain that you all wished for her deliverance. If it was for the wealthiest, the 300 would have risen, and if it was for those who had both these qualifications, loyalty to the city and wealth, then those would have risen, who subsequently made those large donations, for it was loyalty and wealth that led them to do so. But that crisis and that day called, it seems, not merely for a man of loyalty and wealth, but for one who had also followed the course of events closely from the first, and had come to a true conclusion as to the motive and the aim with which Philip was acting as he was. For no one who was unacquainted with these, and had not scrutinized them from an early period, was any the more likely, for all his loyalty and wealth, to know what should be done, or to be able to advise you. The man who was needed was found that day in me. I came forward and addressed you in words which I ask you to listen to with attention, For 2 reasons. First, because I would have you realize that I was the only orator or politician who did not desert his post as a loyal citizen in the hour of danger, but was found there, speaking and proposing what your need required, in the midst of terror. And secondly, because by the expenditure of a small amount of time, you will be far better qualified for the future in the whole art of political administration. My words then were these, quote, "Those who are unduly disturbed by the idea that Philip can count upon the support of Thebes do not, I think, understand the present situation, for I am quite sure that, if this were so, we should have heard of his being, not at Elatea, but on our own borders. At the same time, I understand quite well that he has come to prepare the way for himself at Thebes." "Listen," I said, "while I tell you the true state of affairs. Philip already has at his disposal the Thebans whom he could win over either by bribery or by deception, and those who have resisted him from the front and are opposing him now, he has no chance of winning. What then is his design and object in seizing Elatea? He wishes, by making a display of force in their neighborhood and bringing up his army, to encourage and embolden his own friends, and to strike terror into his enemies, that so they may either concede out of terror what they now refuse, or may be compelled. Now," I said, "if we make up our minds at the present moment to remember any ill-natured action which the Thebans may have done us, and to distrust them on the assumption that they are on the side of our enemies, we shall be doing, in the first place, just what Philip would pray for. And further, I am afraid that his present opponents may then welcome him, that all may philippize with one consent, and that he and they may march to Attica together. If, however, you follow my advice, and give your minds to the problem before us, instead of to the contentious criticism of anything that I may say, I believe that I shall be able to win your approval for my proposals, and to dispel the danger which threatens the city. What then must you do? You must first moderate your present alarm, and then change your attitude, and be alarmed, all of you, for the Thebans. They are far more within the reach of disaster than we. It is they whom the danger threatens first. Secondly, those who are of a military age with the cavalry must march to Eleusis, and let everyone see that you yourselves are in arms, in order that those who sympathize with you in Thebes may be enabled to speak in defense of the right, with the same freedom that their opponents enjoy, when they see that, just as those who are trying to sell their country to Philip have a force ready to help them at Elatea, so those who would struggle for freedom have you ready at hand to help them, and to go to their aid if anyone attacks them. Next, I bid you elect 10 envoys and give them full authority, with the generals, to decide the time of their own journey to Thebes, and to order the march of the troops. But when the envoys arrive in Thebes, how do I advise that they should handle the matter? I ask your special attention to this. They must require nothing of the Thebans. To do so at such a moment would be shameful, but they must undertake that we will go to their aid, if they bid us do so, on the ground that they are in extreme peril, and that we foresee the future better than they, in order that, if they accept our offer and take our advice, we may have secured our object, and our action may wear an aspect worthy of this city. Or, if after all we are unsuccessful, the Thebans may have themselves to blame for any mistakes which they now make, while we shall have done nothing disgraceful or ignoble." End quote. When I had spoken these words, and others in the same strain, I left the platform. All joined in commending these proposals. No one said a word in opposition, and I did not speak thus and then fail to move a motion, nor move a motion and then fail to serve as envoy, nor serve as envoy and then fail to persuade the Thebans. I carried the matter through in person from beginning to end, and gave myself up unreservedly to meet the dangers which encompassed the city. Demosthenes to the clerk. Bring me the resolution which was then passed. But now, Aeschines, how would you have me describe your part, and how mine, that day? Shall I call myself, as you would call me by way of abuse and disparagement, Battalus, and you no ordinary hero even, but a real stage hero, Cresphontes or Creon, or the character which you cruelly murdered at Colitis, Oenomaus? Then I, Battalus of Paeania, prove myself of more value to my country in that crisis than Oenomaus of Cothocide. In fact, you were of no service on any occasion, while I played the part which became a good citizen throughout. Demosthenes to the clerk. Read this decree. The decree of Demosthenes is read. This was the first step towards our new relations with Thebes, and the beginning of a settlement. Up to this time the cities had been inveigled into mutual hostility, hatred, and mistrust by these men. But this decree caused the peril that encompassed the city to pass away like a cloud. It was for an honest citizen, if he had any better plan than mine, to make it public at the time, instead of attacking me now. The true counselor and the dishonest accuser, unlike as they are in everything, differ most of all in this. The one who declares his opinion before the event and freely surrenders himself as responsible to those who follow his advice, to fortune, to circumstances, to anyone. The other is silent when he ought to speak, and then carps at anything untoward that may happen. That crisis, as I have said, was the opportunity for a man who cared for his country, the opportunity for honest speaking. But so much further than I need will I go, that if anyone who can now point to any better course, or any course at all except that which I chose, I admit my guilt. If anyone has discovered any course today which would have been our advantage had we followed it at the time, I admit that it ought not to have escaped me. But if there neither is nor was such a possibility, if even now, even today, no one can mention any such course, what was the counselor of the people to do? Had he not to choose the best of the plans which suggested themselves and were feasible? This I did. For the herald asked the question, Aeschines, who wishes to speak? Not, who wishes to bring accusations about the past? Nor, who wishes to guarantee the future? And while you sat speechless in the assembly throughout that period, I came forward and spoke. Since, however, you did not do so then, at least inform us now, and tell us what words, which should have been upon my lips, were left unspoken. What precious opportunity offered to the city was left unused by me? What alliance was there, what course of action to which I ought, by preference, to have guided my countrymen? But with all mankind the past is always dismissed from consideration, and no one under any circumstances proposes to deliberate about it. It is the future or the present that make their call upon a statesman's duty. Now at that time the danger was partly in the future and partly already present, and instead of cavilling disingenuously at the results, consider the principle of my policy under such circumstances, for in everything the final issue falls out as heaven wills, but the principle which he follows itself reveals the mind of the statesman. Do not therefore account it a crime on my part that Philip proved victorious in battle. The issue of that event lay with God, not with me. But show me that I did not adopt every expedient that was possible, so far as human reason could calculate, that I did not carry out my plan honestly and diligently, with exertions greater than my strength could bear, or that the policy which I initiated was not honorable and worthy of Athens, and indeed necessary, and then denounce me, but not before. But if the thunderbolt or the storm which fell has proved too mighty not only for us, but for all the other Hellenes, what are we to do? It is as though a ship owner who had done all that he could to ensure safety, and had equipped the ship with all that he thought would enable her to escape destruction, and had then met with a tempest in which the tackling had been strained or even broken to pieces, were to be held responsible for the wreck of the vessel. Why, he would say, I was not steering the ship, just as I was not the general. I had no power over fortune. She had power over everything. But consider and observe this point. If it was fated that we should fare as we did, even when we had the Thebans to help us in the struggle, what must we have expected if we had not had even them for our allies, but they had joined Philip? And this was the object for which Philip employed every tone that he could command. And if, when the battle took place, as it did, 3 days' march from Attica, the city was encompassed by such peril and terror, what should we have had to expect if this same disaster had occurred anywhere within the borders of our own country? Do you realize that, as it was, a single day and a second and a third gave us the power to rally, to collect our forces, to take a breath, to do much for the deliverance of the city, but that had it been otherwise? It is not well, however, to speak of things which we have not had to experience, thanks to the goodwill of one of the gods, and to the protection which the city obtained for herself in this alliance, which you denounce. The whole of this long argument, gentlemen of the jury, is addressed to yourselves and to the circle of listeners outside the bar, for to this despicable man it would have been enough to address a short, plain sentence. If to you alone, Aeschines, the future was clear, before it came, you should have given warning when the city was deliberating upon the subject. But if you had no such foreknowledge, you have the same ignorance to answer for as others. Why then should you make these charges against me, any more than I against you? For I have been a better citizen than you with regard to this very matter of which I am speaking. I am not as yet talking of anything else, just in so far as I gave myself up to the policy which all thought expedient, neither shrinking from nor regarding any personal risk. While you neither offered any better proposals than mine, for then they would not have followed mine, nor yet made yourself useful in advancing mine in any way. What the most worthless of men, the bitterest enemy of the city, would do, you are found to have done, when all was over, and at the same time as the irreconcilable enemies of the city, Aristratus and Naxos, Aristolios and Thasos, are bringing the friends of Athens to trial. Aeschines, in Athens itself, is accusing Demosthenes. But surely one who treasured up the misfortunes of the Hellenes, that he might win glory for them for himself, deserved to perish rather than to stand as the accuser of another. And one who has profited by the very same crisis as the enemies of the city cannot possibly be loyal to his country. You prove it, moreover, by the life you live, the actions you do, the measures you take, and the measures, too, that you do not take. Is anything being done which seems advantageous to the city? Aeschines is speechless. Has any obstruction, any untoward event occurred? There you find Aeschines, like a rupture or a sprain, which wakes into life so soon as any trouble overtakes the body. But since he bears so hardly upon the results, I desire to say what may even be a paradox, and let no one in the name of heaven be amazed at the length to which I go, but give a kindly consideration to what I say. Even if what was to come was plain to all beforehand, even if all foreknew it, even if you, Aeschines, have been crying with a loud voice in warning and protestation, you who uttered not so much as a sound, even then, I say, it was not right for the city to abandon her course if she had any regard for her fame, or for our forefathers, or for the ages to come. As it is, she is thought no doubt to have failed to secure her object, as happens to all alike, whenever God wills it. But then, by abandoning in favor of Philip her claim to take the lead of others, she must have incurred the blame of having betrayed them all. Had she surrendered without a struggle those claims in defense of which our forefathers faced every imaginable peril, who would not have cast scorn upon you, Aeschines? Upon you, I say, not, I trust, upon Athens, nor upon me. In God's name, with what faces should we have looked upon those who came to visit the city, if events had come round to the conclusion as they now have? If Philip had been chosen as commander and lord of all, and we had stood apart, while the others carried on the struggle to prevent these things, and that, although the city had never yet in time past preferred an inglorious security to the hazardous vindication of a noble cause? What Hellene, what foreigner, does not know that the Thebans and the Spartans, who were powerful still earlier, and the Persian king would all gratefully and gladly have allowed Athens to take what she liked and keep all that was her own, if she would do the bidding of another, and let another take the first place in Hellas? But this was not, it appears, the tradition of the Athenians. It was not tolerable. It was not in their nature. From the beginning of time, no one had ever yet succeeded in persuading the city to throw in her lot with those who were strong but unrighteous in their dealings, and to enjoy the security of servitude. Throughout all time she has maintained her perilous struggle for preeminence, honor, and glory. And this policy you look upon as so lofty, so proper to your own national character, that of your forefathers also. It is those who have acted thus that you praise most highly, and naturally. For who would not admire the courage of those men who did not fear to leave their land and their city and to embark upon their ships, that they might not do the bidding of another? Who chose for their general Themistocles, who had counseled them thus, and stoned Cercylas to death, when he gave his voice for submission to a master's orders? And not him alone, but for your wives stoned his wife also to death. For the Athenians of that day did not look for an orator or a general who would enable them to live in happy servitude. They cared not to live at all, unless they might live in freedom. For every one of them felt that he had come into being, not for his father and his mother alone, but also for his country. And wherein lies the difference? He who thinks he was born for his parents alone waits the death which destiny assigns him in the course of nature. But he who thinks he was born for his country also will be willing to die, that he may not see her in bondage, and will look upon the outrages and the indignities that he must needs bear in a city that is in bondage as more to be dreaded than death. Now were I attempting to argue that I induced you to show a spirit worthy of your forefathers, there is not a man who might not rebuke me with good reason. But in fact, I am declaring that such principles as these are your own. I am showing that before my time in the city displayed this spirit, though I claim that I too have had some share, as your servant, in carrying out your policy in detail. But in denouncing the policy as a whole, in bidding you be harsh with me, as one who has brought terrors and dangers upon the city, the prosecutor, in his eagerness to deprive me of my distinction at the present moment, is trying to rob you of praises that will last throughout all time. For if you condemn the defendant on the ground that my policy was not for the best, men will think that your own judgment has been wrong, and that it was not through the unkindness of fortune that you suffered what befell you. But it cannot be that you were wrong, men of Athens, when you took upon you the struggle for freedom and deliverance. No, by those who at Marathon bore the brunt of the peril, our forefathers. No, by those who at Plataea drew up their battle line. By those at Salamis. By those who off Artemisium fought the fight at sea. By the many who lie in the sepulchres where the people laid them. Brave men, all alike deemed worthy by their country, Aeschines, of the same honor and the same obsequies. Not the successful or the victorious alone, and she acted justly. For all these have done that which it was the duty of brave men to do, but their fortune has been that which heaven assigned to each. Accursed, pouring pedant! If you, in your anxiety to deprive me of the honor and the kindness shown to me by my countrymen, recounted trophies and battles and deeds of long ago, and of which of them did this present trial demand the mention, what spirit was I to take upon me when I mounted the platform, I who came to advise the city how she would maintain her preeminence? Tell me, third-rate actor, the spirit of one who would propose things unworthy of this people. I should indeed have deserved to die, for you too, men of Athens, are not to judge the private suits and public in the same spirit. The business transactions of everyday life must be viewed in the light of the special law and practice associated with each. But the public policy of statesmen must be judged by the principles that your forefathers set before them, and if you believe that you should act worthily of them, then, whenever you come into court to try a public suit, each of you must imagine that with his staff and his ticket there is entrusted to him also the spirit of his country. But I have entered upon the subject of your forefathers' achievements, and have passed over certain decrees and transactions. I desire, therefore, to return to the point from which I digressed. When we came to Thebes, we found envoys there from Philip, and from the Thessalians and his other allies, our friends in terror, his full of confidence. And to show you that I am not saying this now to suit my own purpose, read the letter which we, your envoys, dispatched without delay. The prosecutor, however, has exercised the art of misrepresentation to so extravagant a degree that he attributes to circumstances, not to me, any satisfactory result that was achieved. But for everything that fell out otherwise, he lays the blame upon me and the fortune that attends me. In his eyes, apparently, I, the counselor and orator, have no share in the credit for what was accomplished as the result of oratory and debate, while I must bear the blame alone for the misfortunes which we suffered in arms, and as a result of generalship. What more brutal, what more damnable misrepresentation can be conceived? Demosthenes to the clerk. Read the letter. The letter is read. When they had convened the assembly, they gave audience to the other side first, on the ground that they occupied the position of allies, and these came forward and delivered the harangues full of the praises of Philip and of accusations against yourselves, recalling everything that you had ever done in opposition to the Thebans. The sum of it all was that they required the Thebans to show their gratitude for the benefits which they had received from Philip, and to exact the penalty for the injuries they had received from you, in whichever way they preferred, either by letting them march through their country against you, or by joining them in the invasion of Attica. And they showed, as they thought, that the result of the course which they advised would be that the herds and slaves and other valuables of Attica would find their way into Boeotia, while the result of what, as they alleged, you were about to propose would be that those of Boeotia would be plundered in consequence of the war. They said much more, but all tending to the same effect. As for our reply, I would give my whole life to tell to you in detail, but I fear lest, now that those times have gone by, you may feel as if a very deluge had overwhelmed all, and may regard anything that is said on the subject as vanity and vexation. But hear at least what we persuaded them to do, and their answer to us. Demosthenes to the clerk. Take this and read it. The answer of the Thebans is read. After this they invited and summoned you. You marched, you went to their aid, and, to pass over the events which intervened, they received you in so friendly a spirit that while their infantry and cavalry were encamped outside the walls, they welcomed your troops into the houses within the city, among their children and wives, and all that was most precious to them. 3 eulogies did the Thebans pronounce upon you before the world that day, and those of the most honorable kind. The first upon your courage, the second upon your righteousness, the third upon your self-control. For when they chose to side with you in the struggle, rather than against you, they judged that your courage was greater and your requests more righteous than Philip's. And when they placed in your power what they and all men guard most jealously, their children and wives, they showed their confidence in your self-control. In all these points, men of Athens, your conduct proved that their judgment had been correct. For the force came into the city, but no one made a single complaint, not even an unfounded complaint, against you. So virtuously did you conduct yourselves, and twice you fought by their side, in the earliest battles, the battle by the river and the winter battle, and showed yourselves not only irreproachable, but even admirable in your discipline, your equipment, and your enthusiasm. These things called forth expressions of thanks to you from other states, and sacrifices and processions to the gods from yourselves. And I should like to ask Aeschines whether, when all this was happening, and the city was full of pride and joy and thanksgiving, he joined in the sacrifices and the rejoicing of the multitude, or whether he sat at home, grieving and groaning and angry at the good fortune of his country. If he was present, and was seen in his place with the rest, surely his present action is atrocious, nay, even impious, when he asks you, who have taken an oath by the gods, to vote today that those very things were not excellent, of whose excellence he himself, on that day, made the gods his witnesses. If he was not present, then surely he deserves to die many times, for grieving at the sight of the things which he brought rejoicing to others. Demosthenes to the clerk. Now read these decrees also. The decrees ordering sacrifices are read. Thus we were occupied at the time with sacrifices, while the Thebans were reflecting how they had been saved by our help. And those who, in consequence of my opponents' proceedings, had expected that they would themselves stand in need of help, found themselves, after all, helping others, in consequence of the action that they took upon my advice. But what the tone of Philip's utterance was, and how greatly he was confounded by what had happened, you can learn from his letter, which he sent to the Peloponnese. Demosthenes to the clerk. Take these and read them. Demosthenes to the jury. That you may know what was effected by my perseverance, by my travels, by the hardships I endured, by all those decrees of which Aeschines spoke so disparagingly just now. You have had, as you know, many great and famous orators, men of Athens, before my time, Callistratus himself, Aristophane, Cephalus, Thrasybulus, and a vast number of others. Yet not one of these ever gave himself up entirely to the state for any purpose. The mover of a decree would not serve as ambassador. The ambassador would not move the decree. Each left himself, at one and the same time, some respite from work, and somewhere to lay the blame in case of accidents. Well, someone may say, did you so excel them in force and boldness as to do everything yourself? I do not say that, but so strong was my conviction of the seriousness of the danger that had overtaken the city, that I felt I ought not to give my personal safety any place whatever in my thoughts. It was enough for a man to do his duty, and to leave nothing undone. And I was convinced with regard to myself, foolishly perhaps, but still convinced, that no mover would make a better proposal, no agent would execute it better, no ambassador would be more eager and more honest in his mission than I. For these reasons, I assigned every one of these offices to myself. Demosthenes to the clerk. Read Philip's letters. Philip's letters are read. To this condition, Aeschines, was Philip reduced by my statesmanship. This was the tone of his utterances, though before this he used to threaten the city with many a bold word. For this I was deservedly crowned by those here assembled, and though you were present, you offered no opposition, while Diondas, who indicted the proposer, did not obtain the necessary fraction of the votes. Demosthenes to the clerk. Read me these decrees. Demosthenes to the jury, which escaped condemnation, and which Aeschines did not even indict. The decrees are read. These decrees, men of Athens, contain the very same syllables, the very same words, as those which Aristonicus previously employed in his proposal, and which Ctesiphon, the defendant, has employed now, and Aeschines neither prosecuted the proposer of them himself, nor supported the person who indicted him. Yet surely, if the charges which he is bringing against me today are true, he would have had a better reason then for prosecuting Demosthenes, the proposer of the decree, and Hyperides, than he has for prosecuting Ctesiphon. And why? Because Ctesiphon can refer you to them, to the decision of the courts, to the fact that Aeschines himself did not accuse them, though they had moved exactly what he has moved now, to the prohibition by law of further prosecution in such cases, and to many other facts, whereas then the case would have been tried on its merits before the defendant had got the advantage of any such precedent. But of course it was impossible then for Aeschines to act as he has acted now, to select out of many periods of time long past, and many decrees, matters which no one either knew or thought would be mentioned today, to misrepresent them, to change the dates, to put false reasons for the actions taken in place of the true, and so appear to have a case. At the time this was impossible. Every word spoken then must have been spoken with the truth in view, at no distance of time from the events, while you still remembered all the facts and had them practically at your fingers' ends. For that reason he evaded all investigation at the time, and he has come before you now, in the belief, I fancy, that you will make this a contest of oratory, instead of an inquiry into our political careers, that it is upon our eloquence, not upon the interests of the city, that you will decide. End of section 28. Recording by Roger Serling.